Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for our audience that has gathered here in front of the Standard Chartered SE Venture stage today. My name is Blum Spineda. I'm an MD with Standard Chartered, and I head our banking and coverage for Fintech, Internet, and Technology for the bank globally. So, welcome again. We're pleased to kick off, I think, what hopefully will be an insight-rich set of experiences on the Standard Chartered stage. And I am very pleased to introduce to you our panel, right? That's going to be talking about a topic that I'll introduce shortly after. But just from my left going forward, this is Ton Lin. He is the Chief Investment Officer of MicroConnect, which he will talk about. It's a very exciting fintech that is serving micro businesses in China, has had tremendous growth, tremendous potential, and it's all upside from what they're gathering. But he's also have deep experiences in hedge funds and private equity. So welcoming Ton Lin, please. Yeah. And then the next one is Rezwan Shafiq. He's a partner with Capco, which is a specialized financial institutions management consultancy, specializing in digital transformation and technology. And he's also the head of Hong Kong for Capco. So Rez, great to meet you here.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not the least is Timothy Loh. So Tim, it's with SC Ventures. So a colleague of mine here at Standard Chartered Bank, and he'll be talking about some of our investing companies in this mix.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so the topic for today, right? It's a very long topic, but basically, it was inspired by a favorite quote of mine. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right? And when you think about the journeys that fintechs are on, I think this sparked really an idea in my mind around, do you go fast or do you want to go far? Why can't you do both? Why can't you go fast and far? Why can't you get to this concept of hypergrowth? And so what I wanted to do was really tee up for my distinguished panel, maybe find some examples of how, through partnerships, through building ecosystems instead of just focusing on your own story, you can both go fast and go far and really achieve what you're aiming for. So I wanted to start off maybe with Ton, right? And really talk a little bit more, Ton, about MicroConnect. And maybe after you describe the business, talk a little bit about partnerships and ecosystem, why that's been such a big part of your story.
Thank you, Blums. It's great to be here. Please allow me to introduce the business a little bit. Then we will talk about how we see partnership help us to go both far and fast. MicroConnect is a very new company. We started a year ago. It was founded by Charles Lee and Gary Zhang. Charles Lee, most of you possibly know, after serving 10 years as a CEO of Hong Kong Stock Exchange, he came to realize actually there's a very little you can do with the traditional finance in Wall Street style to help the small and micro business, the small guys on the main street. So he founded MicroConnect. Our dream is we try to change that. And I think with the digitalization of China's consumer sector and the advance of blockchain technology, it's finally possible. I will explain how we do it. We invest into small and micro business in China in the consumer sector. Our investment are not debt, neither equity. So in exchange of our investment, we ask these small stores to pay us back for a portion of their daily revenue for a certain period of time. It's not a debt investment because we do take the downside risk. If the business go under or go unlucky, we don't ask their principal back. But it's not equity either because we only share the profit for a period of time, and also we took it from top line. This way, we think it's a suitable and appropriate product that allow us to tap into millions and millions of small stores on their daily cash flow in a transparent way. And how do we execute it? At the end of every day, we execute these contracts through our partners in commercial banking sector, in SaaS company to capture the daily revenue flow. And also the commercial banks help us to intercept the cash flow and to do the automatic splitting. So the business has been going with fire for the past 10 months. We started about 11 months ago. Then for the past 10 months, we were able to invest into 1,500 stores in more than 100 cities across 30 provinces now. And every month, we were still able to deploy about 300 to 500 more stores, 1,000 stores next year. So hopefully by the end of next year, we will be the largest store backers in China, and a year after, maybe globally, we'll be one of the largest. So going a little bit back to the partnership is everything to us because we rely on, we are kind of like building an ecosystem. So the capital, technology, data, and asset all come from our partners. For example, we rely on brand franchisors to provide us with the stores. Those are assets to us. For them, we are the alternative financing source. We rely on SaaS company. We partner with almost all the leading SaaS company in China. We collect all the daily revenue of these stores and ensure they are accurate and transparent, and we pay them to do so. And for the commercial banks, we partner up with almost a dozen of the leading commercial banks in China. They help us to intercept and split the cash flow. And we also work with all sorts of institutional investors. They provide us with capital. In return, they get the uncorrelated, excellent, I would say, risk-adjusted returns. Of course, we work with a lot of development agencies as well because we are big on impact investing, and we do believe to do well by doing good. So I hope that give you.
And then just, I guess, as a follow-up question to that, Ton, if you didn't have those partnerships, like how many years or months or decades would you have lost in terms of delivering the milestone of getting to 1,000 stores, you think?
Without partners, we wouldn't even know where to start. Okay. So for the past 10 months, everything actually it's partners. Only if they win, we win.
Okay. Amazing. We'll come back to that, Ton. But I wanted to pull in Rez, right? I think Capco is very well known to have just tons of research and insights when it comes to the role of partnerships, especially you work with a lot of like traditional banks and FIs, but you also help to connect them into fintechs and see what fintechs can do to really expand their capabilities, take them to the next level. Can you talk a little bit about what you're finding out from, partnerships, best practices, etc., and maybe some examples, Rez?
Williams, thank you for having me, and it's lovely to be here in Hong Kong Fintech Week. I'll try and connect you back to what Ton's beautiful business is in some ways, right? I mean, we're seeing, we've been seeing fintechs, they're nothing new anymore. They were a decade into the fintech journey in many ways. And you've got wonderful companies that are leveraging other fintechs to actually deliver solutions. Like, without the other partnerships, without the other connectors, your business model would be different perhaps, right? Or maybe it would be slower. So that whole ecosystem is they're helping each other in many ways, right? To launch markets that they wouldn't be having access to before, to find solutions maybe they haven't found before. But from a corporate perspective, we do a lot of work, you're right. I mean, Capco probably, more than our competitors, we probably do a heck of a lot of work with digitization and digital transformations for what you call incumbent organizations, right? Now, what we see is two or three things. I mean, banks in particular are very interested in fintechs and partnering with fintechs. We've got Tim next to me here. I'm sure he'll tell you much more about that. But there are things where we see the question of this panel, I think, hypergrowth, right? So partnerships is always a good idea in my mind, right? It does bring a value. It brings outside perspective thinking for everybody involved. It allows us to find different solutions. But how do we get to hypergrowth, right? What are the examples where we see it work? And from our perspective, where we see, partnerships, leading to hypergrowth is where we have a scenario where the fintech in its own right is solving a problem in its own right? It is a business of its own right. It is not an accelerator. It is not a service as such. Those are useful. Those are definitely impactful to incumbent banks. But where we see hypergrowth is where we have similar to Microconnect at G-Turn. You're solving a problem in your own right. You have your own client base. You've already proven to the market that there is a demand and a product market fit. Now, at some point, you may wish you had a bigger balance sheet, right? And this is where the actual solution comes in, you know. Organizations that look at the value chain, and I'm talking about banks. If you're a bank and you look at your value chain, you say, well, I'm really, really good at private banking, at the ultra high net worth range. I'd like to get into commercial lending, right? Do I go and build that by myself, or do I get into a partnership? Now that's when we see something really interesting happen, right? The bank has, by virtue of being in asset management, has a ton of balance sheet, right? AUM. Now, how can we leverage that? Well, for their perspective, they can go and build something. Or what we find really leading to, but that's slow. But what we really find is when they come to someone like Turn and say, hey, I want to go into this commercial lending, you're already in this space, you have the technology, you have the ecosystem, you've got the drive, how do we leverage you and give you our assets, right? And that combination is incredibly powerful. It's fast to market, it's usually first to market, and it does, in my opinion, have a greater probability of leading to hypergrowth.
And you mentioned, Rez, like I remember when we were chatting, there were two examples, or at least an example. Was it a Brazilian example of where they were able to sort of do that and come to far that you worked with, or your company worked with?
Yeah, I think I was mentioning that there's two great stories that we've got. One is in Brazil. It's an established bank, you know, a retail bank, in fact, but they realized that they needed to go to the Gen Zs of the world. They wanted to make sure they captured the younger generation, and they weren't able to do that with the traditional platform. So they came to us and asked, you know, how can we do this? Well, we said, let's build a digital bank. No branches, digital only, multi-product, you know, solution. And, you know, for them, you know, the project still goes on actually, but you know, it was a wonderful story. They achieved what they wanted to do, but they wanted to do it themselves. They wanted to use their own stack, so to speak. They wanted to, you know, it was the whole discussion around, I can do it myself, and it was fine. They, we were very successful. We went to market. They captured the market share they wanted to capture, but it took 4 years. Now, conversely, in Europe, we had a very similar use case, but this time the client said, well, I don't care how I get there, I just want to get there fast, right? And I want to leverage whoever the best people are to leverage. And in that scenario, we absolutely went on the partnership routes, right? We looked at who in the ecosystem, right, would benefit from a partnership, and not just who in the ecosystem can provide the technical specs. Most organizations can build the technical side, but when you look at the value chain and say, well, this person already solved this problem, partnering with this bank's balance sheet made it fast track. That will only mean good things for that fintech, which will only mean longevity, which in fact actually only means good things for the incumbent bank. And as a result of that partnership, a series of partnerships in fact, but the open-mindedness of the partnership, we went to market within 18 months.
That's really fast. And I think what I like about that story is that, again, I think a lot of firms, a lot of partners can maybe supply the technology. That's probably going to be more common. But focusing on maybe where two brands can come together and they together offer something to that customer that's much stronger, much better, much more believable is the way to go to market. So thanks, Rez. I wanted to pull in Tim and really talk about, I think, when we look at like SE Ventures and its different portfolio companies, any I guess examples come to mind of you really pushing, you know, portfolio companies to leverage partnerships or ecosystems, right, to be able to get to their next level of growth and deliver what they want to deliver.
Sure. And Rez just gave me such a good segue to continue with my part. So the first name I want to talk about is Mox Bank. Everyone knows about Mox. It's in Hong Kong. It started in Hong Kong. And it's actually our first venture partnership in Hong Kong as well. So why I say it's such a good segue is because for Mox Bank, we partnered with PCCW, we partnered with Hong Kong Telecom, and we partnered with Trip.com. These three names will be unlikely choices when you want to build a bank, but exactly to your point, Rez, is that they bring in different values and different expertise to the mix. So for Hong Kong Telecom and PCCW, they have the fast domestic clientele in Hong Kong, and they also have the retail expertise. And for Trip.com, they are such a good lifestyle name. So these things, when they fall into place, it just catapulted the Mox experience, and Mox just grew when they started with this partnership. So this is the first name that I want to share with everyone. And the other one is a slightly different partnership. It's called Sodia Custody. It's in Ireland. It's global, but we have just registered in Ireland. The thing is, for this, we partnered with Northern Trust. Northern Trust, for those who don't know, is the biggest and oldest, one of the biggest and oldest bank in the US. And even though they are in the same banking space as Standard Chartered, the thing is we can pull in different scope and scale in different global footprints. So this the partnership helped us to catapult the whole project. And so that's why we managed to become this Ireland Central Bank's one of the first registered cryptocurrency custodian. Oh, and by the way, for Sodia Custody, it is an institutional grade crypto asset custodian service. So everyone can just click in Sodia, Z-O-D-I-A, and just search on Google. So that's the two partnerships that I think really did different ways. One is a totally different partnership with lifestyle, telecommunication giants and banks, and the other is bank and bank. So these two, I think, is a pretty good example to answer your question.
And I think that really brought to mind, like that example, especially for Mox with, Trip.com, PCCW, just this wide range of folks that they quote unquote partnered with, right? And I think that brings it back to a point we're making here, right? What's the difference between a partnership and an ecosystem, right? I mean, these terms are used very frequently, but sometimes not very accurately. I mean, so for example, when you look at, for example, ecosystems, I think this was in the maybe mid-90s when they started using this in a business context. Traditionally, when you think about ecosystem, it's about something that you see in the world. The ocean is an ecosystem. It's about multiple organisms that live very independently, but somehow cooperate with their environment, right? So there's not a lot of control. It's not something you 100% control, but it works. And because it works together, it grows. So maybe I wanted to go back to, when you think about this, I think this is what scares a lot of people, is that partnerships typically are very maybe rigid or structured, or that's the default. You want it to be very, very controlled, right? Can you talk a little bit about how do you build that level of trust so that maybe even if the outcomes aren't as clear, you can maybe work with other people to build out that future that you can't really imagine yet? Any examples come to mind, Ton, from what you're trying to do at MicroConnect, for example?
Well, I think a partnership is hard. It doesn't happen naturally. So oftentimes we need the interface or connector. For example, when people look at team, they not only look at the VC, but also look at the Standard Charter balance sheet behind. So Tim will act as a connector for the enterprise to Standard Charter. And REST, for example, will be an interface to a broader financial institution. So in my experience, I think in order to build the partnership, you need these middle layers. You need the interface, you need the connector. Most importantly, you need the open mind people within that organization. I think that's exactly what you do.
Res, anything to add to that?
Well, I'm deep in thought, actually. I mean, I think, look, I mean, I go on a lot about design principles, right? And Blooms, you put it right. I mean, you can't have a partnership that's so structured that it can't ebb and flow as the environment changes, right? Partnership, by definition, is long-term, marriage-like, right? Things are going to change throughout the course of a marriage. And we can't go into it saying, well, this is the box and you must remain within it. I think that's the wrong thing to go into it. Mindset, if you like, right? So I talk a lot about design principles. And the design principle, very simply, I'll bring it back to Tun's model, right? I love MicroConnect. Why do I love MicroConnect? Because it's not equity sharing, but it's equitable, right? It is a model that is trying to work with other businesses and saying, you know what, I'm going to give you some money, use it as you will, but then I share in the upside, right? And if you don't have the upside, well, I don't have the upside, right? And it's that design principle, it's that mindset.
Right? It's a new way of thinking about it, right? Yeah.
Right. And I bring it back to VC worlds, right? I mean, some of the best VCs in the world, the simplest things that they do that makes them the best things is make a very simple term sheet, right? If you're trying to manage a partnership with 300 pages of legal docs, you know, and which is basically my equivalent of a marriage by saying you have to stay within this box, you're pretty much setting yourself up for something not great, right? Because you don't have that trust in between it, right? So look down the value chain, right? Look at what is my strength and how do I focus on my strengths and keep focused on my strengths? How do I look at the fintech? How do I realize and appreciate their skills and their pace and their focus areas? And how do I make sure I don't disrupt that in my objectives, right? And if you do that along the line, I think you get to the point of an ocean of ecosystem, right? And that ocean of ecosystem just happens by some simple design principles, not by 300-page documents and lawyers. I hope that helps.
Okay, yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think I totally agree that partnerships can have a very structured way to approach it. One illustration that I want to quote is TAS Connect, TAS Connect, which launched earlier this year. It came about when one of our clients, Lenovo, came to all the banks and asked for a solution to help them with their supply chain, which is totally fragmented. You can imagine it's billions of dollars of trade transactions a year for them. So they asked the banks to give them a solution. And so as SC Ventures and Standard Chartered, we think a little bit differently. So it's not the typical partnership that we think about. Because we offered a JV sort of structure. So we asked them that, are you interested to build a product together? So it's bank agnostic, so every bank can go into this product. And also client agnostic, so it can be personalized for every client if that works. And Lenovo loved it. And they think that this can be an alternative income stream for them as well. So if it works, it commercializes, and then it will be an income stream for Lenovo in its own right. So that's another type of partnership that we go with. It's not just like, okay, A plus B, and we'll go with that with the business. But it's very organic. Anything can happen. So that's something I want to share.
Great, thanks, Tim. I wanted to, if there's any questions from the audience, actually, I wanted to maybe pull you in. Anyone have a question or a comment for us? Just wanted to check. No one? Okay. So yeah, okay. So
Easy crowd.
I know, yeah, no, exactly. They're digesting. So I think one part that I wanted to get to is when you think about, for example, going forward, right? What would your advice be to just other fintechs that are looking? It's a very tough time right now to be a fintech in this market. Capital's drying up. There's a lot of competition. There's a higher bar to get funding over the bar. What would your advice be to them in terms of raising money, thinking about their strategy, what they're focused on, especially when it comes to the partnership tab on that business plan?
For us, we just stay focused and do our thing.
Focus on one thing. Rez, anything?
I can't just give one sentence like Tun can, right? No, I think it's solve an end problem, right? For a fintech, it's obvious when a fintech is a service to all versus solving a problem. And I think, again, I say this every single time when I'm sitting with fintechs, just focus on the end problem. If you're solving a real-world problem, you're going to do well. Funding will come.
Tim?
It seems like I'm going to summarize what you two gentlemen just said. I think come and go, it's a line, but do the best at your own expertise. So both complement each other as a partnership, and then just drive to the end goal, which is a shared goal.
And I think the one thing I would add to that, right, and I think really inspired by when I first heard about MicroConnect as well, I think you've got to focus on the customer problem you're trying to solve. Because everything else, the technology, blockchain, all of these different things are tools. But if you're not clear on the problem you're trying to solve, I think that's, for example, to me, the problem that the metaverse has right now. It's not very clear on the problem it's trying to solve. I think for your own company, if you're a founder, in the audience here, you're going to be watching this after, like, what's your customer looking to do? For MicroConnect, for example, it's a micro entrepreneur or business owner that's trying to raise capital. Yes?
Hello, my name's Kimberly Cole. I work for Link. I'm curious about often the connections between all of the firms that you have a partnership or, the ecosystem is happening at the CEO level. But there's a lot of information within the firm in other departments that could help you hypergrow. How are you connecting sort of the whole of your organizations to drive that growth?
Thanks, Kimberly. Amazing question. So I think the question was, for example, when you think about partnerships, again, if we pull in the Mox Bank example, it's probably, Richard and the Trip.com CEO and Bill and Mary, but it's a very senior to senior thing. So do partnerships only happen in country club halls and exclusive clubs? Or again, when you look at like who's actually maybe doing a lot of the work, it's at that next level down. How are folks solving for that? To get that knowledge, right? To get that knowledge from the groundswell onto a partnership strategy. Anyone want to take a stab at that?
I'm not sure if my example answers your question. What I noticed from my failure cases, if you only work on the top level, often end up with strategic talk without the real thing being implemented. But if you start from the bottom, oftentimes it get lost in the institutional maze as well. So for the successful case we have, I think the key I observe is really you find the internal champion who will really understand your business and then take your KPI as his or her KPI and promote it from within. It's always easier to promote from within, I guess. I don't know that answers.
Yeah,
Dem?
I was going to say there's a term intrapreneur that I want to talk about, which we have another session later on. So please stay along. But the intrapreneur, I think it's something that have to build in with an entrepreneur, encourage entrepreneurs within the organization. So again, it's not just this top-level C-suite decision makers that do the job. I think within the organizations, there are all the know-hows and the experts on the ground doing the work. So we have to engage them to make sure everyone is on the same page so that the partnership will work. Otherwise, it will only be at the top-down level, and we know that when top-down, sometimes it just may not be as smooth as we want it to be. So I think that is something that should be considered as well.
Yes.
Kimberly, I've got so many examples of our clients who are doing so many great works along the space, right? You're absolutely right. I mean, the success of people like Google, etc., are there because Google Maps came because it was a side project of an employee, not because the CEO thought of it one day after a weekend kayaking, right? So, I'll be selfish. I'll give you our example. So at Capco, we have a innovation lab called Genesis, right? And it's designed to solve these types of problems, right? And one of the initiatives that Genesis ran last month was a Dragon's Den exercise, right? So we basically just said, go and come up with any ideas. It could be anything you want, and you will get our innovation lab's time as an investment, right? You may even get dollar investments, whatever you want, right? But be clear about what you want. And it was amazing. Like, I was proud to be on the panel. There's a gentleman sitting right behind you. He was also on the panel. And we got things from, Web 3.0, what does it really mean? How do we solve for metaverse? To how do I apply value at risk models to cryptocurrencies? To how do I solve wealth management for women, right? Which is something that I don't think any of our exec team would have ever really intuitively thought about, right? So I think to answer your question, you're right. The best ideas are embedded within the organizations. We hire smart people. Why would we not listen to them? But we have to give them an avenue. And there are ways and means, like Dragon's Den style things. It's a lot of fun, but it's serious business, right? Probably our next campaign for wealth management is going to be centered around women in wealth management. And that wouldn't have happened without Genesis, without our lab. Hope that answers your question.
Just one thing to add, I think it's an amazing question, Kimberly. I think one part of it is smaller companies, smaller startups do it well because they're flatter and they're smaller. When they have a team meeting, all of the thinking and all of the insight and all of the relationships are in that one room. I think big companies, it's a bit of a cop-out, and quite honestly, it's a challenge, right? To really cut across the boundaries and do the hard work to connect the dots across the org. But I think the ones that do it well are going to be good at partnerships. If they're only going to depend on someone that carries a VP Strategic Partnerships title or an MD Strategic Partnerships title, that's going to fail, right? Because it's everyone's job to really think about partnerships. But I think they've got to do the hard work. Okay, I think we're right about out of time, but I think I wanted to just maybe do one last go around in terms of one sentence, partnership drives growth because, like maybe just a final word from each of you. Who wants to go first? Maybe we'll shake it up. Tim.
I'll just repeat myself. I think partnership works because everyone brings the best of themselves to the table, complement each other, and just work towards the same goal, and it works.
Really good. Rez?
I can't add more than that.
Perfect. Done. Any final words?
Partnership is everything to us. They bring different type of resources.
Same here. I mean, for example, just the partnership to deliver this panel to you all. Hopefully you were able to learn, but I'd really like to thank Ton and Rez and Tim for sharing. And hopefully you enjoyed, took away. Feel free to hit us up on LinkedIn and enjoy the rest of the FinTech week. Thank you very much, everyone.